So now, again, one of the main topics that's been on everyone's mind here is, and has just come out of almost nowhere in the public space in the last few months almost, is dual use technology, the growth of domestic industries and sovereign capabilities for defense, and also if we're going to invest to these levels, to this 5% of NATO, or 5% of targets for NATO, or sorry, 5% of GDP for NATO targets. There, the words are in order now. Then the question is, how do we get additional benefits out of this? How is this not just spending the money and immediately channeling it to the US, to Sweden, to Germany, to South Korea, to any of those places? How do we bring some of that benefits of these investments, or keep them rather, in Canada and build up our economy, our skills, and all of these things? So with that, I'd like to introduce Murad Hamadi, who's the AI reporter at The Logic. Most of you have hopefully seen at least one of the things he's written, even despite the paywalls. I pay for them, at least. But anyway, I'd like to introduce Murad, who's who's been in this space for a while. He has been reporting on AI before it was cool, so I very much appreciate that. I remember you reporting on, I think, early days of the superclusters, for example. So I'd like to introduce him. He'll be the moderator of the panel, as well as Brett, who's the Chief of Staff of AI for CFAR, Eric, who's the CEO of Cellular Robotics and one of the original founding members of the CRC in general. Nice as you can make the trip, thank you. Lydia, who's the HR Director of Corporate R&D for Magna, and Philip, who's the CFO of Sanctuary Cognitive Systems Corporation. And I believe I owe you a microphone, so thank you very much.
Thanks very much, folks. Yeah, Ryan's just being nice. I've bugged him so many times over the years. Thank you all for being here. I have done panels this year at summits and conferences, but this is my first symposium, so I feel very fancy. Let me do just 2 seconds of scene setting here, and Ryan already stole some of my lines. Canada is about to spend, I think the technical term is absolute gobs of money on defense in a way that we haven't in a very long time. I pulled the numbers from our own reporting, so blame my colleagues if I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. $9 billion this year, so this fiscal 2025-26, including $3.7 billion on what I describe as kit, all the stuff that's not humans. 5% of GDP by 2035, including 1.5% that everybody's gonna figure out what that means. Things that could be defense related, but that aren't necessarily armaments. And that's a lot of money and a big opportunity. So we're here to, or these folks really are here to talk about why that affects the robotics sector. I figured we'd start with a little bit of scene setting and get a sense of why these particular folks are talking about this topic. So maybe starting with Phil, how is what your company does dual use?
What we've discovered, and by the way, so Sanctuary AI is engaged in development of intelligent robotic systems for advanced automation with a focus on commercially performant AI and dexterity primarily. When we started out, we had interest from pretty much across the economy in various industries, everything from retail to household to automotive and so on. Well, what we realized that you're really solving for the same thing across all industries, which is typically labor shortages or to extent productivity. And despite robotics, historically being fairly specialized, there's enormous commonality amongst use cases. So whether you're involved in defense or you're involved in, a distribution center, typically you're involved in the same activity, which is you're moving goods. And that may involve different, human capabilities around pick, move, place, things like that. So what we found is there was a lot of, call it generic sort of capabilities that cut across all industries, and that suggests the opportunity for dual use.
Eric, what about you?
My company makes autonomous underwater vehicles, and I've been involved in this field on and off for about 45 years. So we're in the subsea area, and in the subsea marketplace, I call it telerobotics, has been used extensively since the early 1980s. And the reason for that is because it's completely impractical to put people in the ocean at depth and for a long time. So remote operated vehicles, autonomous underwater vehicles, etc. We make autonomous underwater vehicles. A lot of them are the kind of torpedo-shaped things that people may have seen. Other ones are hovering vehicles, so more egg-shaped or bespoke-shaped. Our background as a company has been commercial, offshore oil and gas, offshore wind farms, science, mineral exploration, like seafloor bathymetric survey, geotechnical survey as well. One thing that's been changing the landscape a little bit in our area is Defense R&D Canada has been funding us for a few years to develop hydrogen-powered subsea vehicles. And hydrogen really changes the possibilities for how much energy you can put on a vehicle. Like the subsea vehicles are made out of metal and you have to make them float. And guess what? Hydrogen and oxygen gas is very buoyant. So it's an excellent way to put a lot of energy in vehicles. So and we're also starting to make large vehicles that fit in a 40-foot containers for doing things like deploying seafloor nodes, deploying other vehicles. And now we're getting a lot of interest from navies who are interested in, can you go here and put some listening nodes on the seafloor? Can you go here? Well, our hydrogen-powered work is funded by DRDC because of the intention to be able to survey under the Arctic ice on a long endurance basis. So there's a lot of crossover in the technologies between these areas. We're getting interest from multiple navies as well as oil and gas companies, et cetera, on these new technologies.
We're going to talk a lot about some of the specific technologies as we go. Lydia, you make many, many things. Where does Magna fit into this conversation?
So I think from a talent standpoint, right, that's kind of where I can speak to. First of all, I've got to say this is an amazing forum, right, to have this discussion, because the talent really doesn't need to always be industry specific. It has to, have the opportunity to cross over. I think in Canada particularly, that'll give us that better advantage, right? And for companies like Magna, we have a global footprint, but we are a Canadian company, and in every country, and Canada is no exception, we really want to see, what we can do, how we can harvest that talent to be that much more competitive in this space.
Brett, so you're not building robots?
Yeah, the non-robot person here.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of. I mean, I don't know what you're doing in the garage, but you helped craft the Pan-Canadian AI strategy, which was one of the things that Ryan had up on that list. Just to start us off, what does this moment that we're in kind of have in common with that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when we first created and when I helped to develop the first Pan-Canadian AI strategy in late 2016, it was a moment where the world was at a bit of an inflection point, particularly started through the US. And Canada recognized that we had a moment in which a lot of talent that had in AI that had trained in Canada and left the country, particularly gone to the US, given the political situation, had a great interest in repatriating. And so that was a moment where Canada could seize this opportunity in AI, recognize where we could be globally competitive, which was on research and talent. There was a real recognition that that is where Canada can have its major advantage. And I think that's really borne out. So, we do have a number of academics here, so I will share this one very fun stat. We just did a bibliometric assessment, and we found that the chairs that we've recruited and retained in Canada, these top AI researchers, are pound for pound the third best group on the planet. Number one, Google. Okay, fine. Number two, depending on the exact measure, is either Stanford or one of the Max Planck Institutes. Then Canada's AI chairs. And then, whatever, MIT, Oxford, Meta, the riffraff, right? So that's really all borne out. And, I think robotics is at this as the same inflection point where there's a growing, and I think rapidly growing, recognition that this is something that is incredibly important as we see the challenges that Canada's facing, and it's a great time to build that recognition both with government and with Canadians that this is something that we can take advantage of.
Yeah. So speaking of this sort of moment to take advantage, Eric, you've already sort of started us off down this path, but I'm interested in how this works from a direction perspective. Like, should all these people be building civilian technologies and then finding defense uses for them? Does it work the other way? Like, how does this happen?
I guess you could say it's a bit of a case of if you build it, they will come. But that can take a long, long time. Like in my case, I've been doing this for over 45 years, as I mentioned. But yeah, there's so many, I think there's huge overlap between in our area anyway, between what navies want and what offshore surveyors want, offshore services companies, oil and gas companies, etc.
So you've got a product in the market, you're already serving commercial clients, and then a Navy sees it and is like, that, I need that too.
Yeah, actually our main sales recently have been in defense. Yeah.
And I mean, I think there is a certain amount of, yes, if you build an incredible product, they will come. And also, if you have great research, that will go in unexpected directions. So just recently, we have a couple AI researchers that have always done very, very fundamental, AI for the sake of AI, reinforcement learning kind of work. And, when I looked at them, I thought, great researchers, but this is not the story that we are going to be telling, right? This is not impact-oriented. And they have just started a company that is doing products for water treatment facilities in remote areas because they realize there's this application of this incredible research. So obviously it doesn't speak to the civilian military pipeline, but does speak to the unexpected ways that incredible work can actually go. And it sounds like that's what's happening.
Not to name check non-members, but we're talking about RL Core here, right? Out of Edmonton. Phil, when you're putting together your plan for this company, are you thinking about like different versions of this robot for different applications? How do you make those decisions?
Yeah, it's been very, very interesting as we've done deployments and got customer feedback and evolved. You start realizing that ultimately we're trying to go where the demand is greatest and where the use cases can be solved the fastest for commercial traction, obviously. And what we've found is that there's practical limitations imposed by customers themselves over what robotic hardware they will allow in factories. They want, at least 3 or 4 nines policy performance. They're not willing to, for example, take a humanoid into a factory anytime soon because it's not certified and hasn't been robustified, I guess. So for us, that's led us to be kind of embodiment agnostic and look for the path of least resistance, which is typically using off-the-shelf hardware, enhancing it with cameras and haptic sensors and things like that, putting your AI on it, and getting it to do things it hasn't done before. So by doing that, it's a quicker path into customers and ultimately to revenue and purchase orders. But what it suggests is a broader menu for robotic solutions. It's not going to be a bipedal humanoid doing everything, right? You could have robotic arms that have been enhanced. You can have mobile bimanual systems. You can have different end effectors. You can have different policies. It's going to be kind of a menu, maybe a sort of paint by number or tick the box in terms of what you want. And that's what we found, as we've been at it for a while, had some false starts along the way. But that's clearly, I think, the path to greatest adoption and ultimately to progress and development.
Yeah, Eric's not sending a swimming humanoid robot after.
Not yet. No.
Yeah.
Highly unlikely.
Lydia, you're on the Magna's on the other end of the supply chain of this to some extent. I mean, how much are you seeing flexibility and interchangeability of hardware or software systems be really important for your clients and as you're, working for them?
Yeah, I think, the big thing that's coming out of this conversation here is the fact that we can have this talent come from various industries, right? We don't have to necessarily. So in the past, right, in automotive, I was always looking for necessarily talent that had strictly automotive, right? I moved into the IT space and realized, you know what, I can get my talent from anywhere. And so it was really important when we were engaging with academia, when we were engaging into the market, that, we had the support for those folks. Coming into the robotics space, it's the same, right? So I'm listening to, my colleagues up here, and it's really exciting to know that, underwater submarines could necessarily have some application. We can draw from talent there. And I think, again, I'm going to go back to this is why this is really important, these discussions, right? To get us talking together and to get us to understand, what we need from the marketplace to make us that much more competitive in Canada.
Right, because I assume that these are, any robotic system of any scale is probably a pretty high ticket item, but you still need economies of scale when you're building them.
Oh, for sure, right? Go ahead.
I would say becoming dramatically cheaper. Right. And that's the two things that are the trend is your friend in terms of robotics is, you think about labor shortages and demographics. And one of the speakers earlier mentioned Korea. Korea has the world's worst fertility rate, and it's getting worse, and they can't do anything about it. There's a demographic time bomb, if you will. So that's going to push the need for robotics, the need for advanced automation. At the same time, the cost of robotic hardware keeps going down. So the trend is your friend, and that will lead to greater adoption. How exactly in 5 years, 10 years remains to be seen, but I think it's inevitability.
To kind of interject, if you compare the cost of naval submarines being in the billions with swarms of autonomous submarines, there's even with relatively expensive autonomous vehicles, because they're not designed for manufacture, or they're still not inexpensive, there's still a massive advantage. And I think there it's really a matter of in the defense industry, do they really believe this is the way to go? And also kind of what people have gotten used to in, well, if we're going to spend a huge amount of money in Canada, like how are we going to do that? Well, we could buy some really expensive stuff, and it's going to take a long time for that to be delivered.
Yeah, give us a sense of the scale. So a submarine costs billions. How much does a swarm cost?
Well, our largest vehicles are like in the $20 plus million, and then the medium-sized ones are like 5 to 10, and then there's a lot of people making like very small vehicles that don't go very far and can't necessarily do very much in the hundreds of thousands.
Right, so you can buy a lot of swarms per submarine, basically.
Yes.
So Eric raises an interesting point here, which is that Canada, sort of for geopolitical reasons, needs to spend this money like now, as soon as possible. $9 billion out the door this fiscal year is. I used to cover federal policy. That's a lot of money for the government to get out the door. Phil, you were talking about the adaptation you're having to do on form factor, but the flagship thing you build is the most sci-fi thing, I think, on stage here. How ready is all this technology actually to go into defense?
It depends on what the final kind of embodiment is. The ability to everyone's seen bipedal humanoids walking around where they sort of fall down. They actually do fall down kind of regularly, but where they fall down is really around dexterity. So dexterity is a real problem. It needs to be cracked, and no one's really cracked that yet. So what's, I think, mitigating or limiting their you are seeing lots of humanoids being deployed, but they're kind of the Walmart greeter type things, which really don't have great economic application. So it's really some of those technical challenges. It's a software challenge, obviously. It's a data gathering challenge, because you can't just scrape the internet for everything you want. You got to go get it from the physical world. But it's also a hardware challenge, too.
Yeah, Lydia, maybe you can talk to us a little bit about this question of like readiness to go to market and the sort of the state of maturity.
Yeah, so I was kind of thinking as we're having that conversation. So um, it's key, right? Companies are always looking to see where they can get the best work done, the fastest, most productive, most efficient, cost effective, and whatnot. And if you're not ready, companies will look elsewhere. Right, so I think we've experienced that. I think, a lot of recent events, from a Canadian sovereignty standpoint, have shown us that, we have really great talent here, and we really need to develop that. The cross section of being able to share talent, I think, is really important because things change really, really quickly. So if we can be adaptable and if we can, have that readily available, that helps us to be more competitive in the market, for sure.
So you've said the magic word there, which is sovereignty. With a little bit of a conceit, I will grant you, but why does it matter that Canada has companies and manufacturing capacity for these technologies? Can't we just buy all this stuff over the border, Brett?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's there's the really obvious sort of, sovereignty is the essence of a nation. We're realizing now that the global landscape of trade was a lot more fragile than we thought and a lot less dependable than we thought. And then we also want to build these things here because then we can export them. I mean, I'm not telling this group anything that they don't know, but I mean, this is a tremendous export industry. And I think it's also, there's a national identity component to this, that Canada is a nation that makes things, and we ought to be a nation that makes things, and we ought to be proud of that. And so, there's that component as well, that this is important to us as a people.
I just maybe add to that, when you think about what's kind of what's happening here, if you think about the application of artificial intelligence into robotics and what the potential is, you're talking about the largest flow of capital in the world, which is a global wage bill. So that's $40 trillion a year. The country that masters that, and there's already some discussion in the United States from companies we've been dealing with about, under pressure of tariffs, we might reshore jobs and automate them, but we need the technology to do that in order to satisfy, demands of the government. So that whoever has that, and I think this is why the Chinese have thrown billions and billions in a very short period of time and spun up 50 humanoid companies in like 2 years, is because they realize that. So there's a tremendous economic power that will derive from this technology as it evolves and is perfected. I'm not sure it's quite industrial revolution type stuff, but it's kind of in that category, I believe.
Is that Canada should be buying Canadian is because in many cases Canadian products are the best in the world, and I've seen a lot of that over my career. I've seen a lot of instances where people say, well, we should buy from the Americans. Why should we buy from you? I said, well, because we're the best. So we've just given someone a presentation and they say, oh, you should see what the U.S. Navy is doing. I said, that's what we just showed you. It's already working.
Yeah, so let me ask the awkward follow-up question there. The first of several awkward questions I'm planning to ask this afternoon, which is, to Phil's point, there's this movement happening in the States because of the way that the administration in the States is playing the industrial game these days. How much can we chest beat as Canadians in a world in which lots of countries want their own manufacturers or their own technology companies? Like, we want sovereignty for ourselves, but so do they. Does that limit our export opportunity?
One thing that we're having to get serious about is manufacturing. And so we cannot manufacture at scale in our facility in Burnaby, BC. And so we have partnered with a US company who is the global leader in manufacturing of expensive, complex subsea equipment or subsea robotic systems. So they don't make what we do, so we've partnered with them. And in Canada, we do not have, what we're finding is that some of our clients and potential clients in Europe save, but we don't want to buy from the US right now. And so we are certainly interested in talking to Canadian manufacturers about how can we partner to build things at scale in Canada.
Could just do some deals on stage here.
So I just want to kind of add to that, so I have a global role, and everybody in their country is very proud of their country, and they're very proud of what they can offer, and they spend a lot of time, right, trying to sell themselves and what they can do. And I think in Canada we can do the same. At the end of the day, if we can do the same thing in Canada that can be done elsewhere, you also have to think about the quality of life that we offer here in Canada. And like I'm obviously very biased, but like par none, right? It's one of the best, if not the best, places in the world. So if we can offer opportunities here, and if we can develop, right, from our economy, I think we'll attract, right, like more to our country. So. And having said that, like I don't want to take away the competitiveness, because the export piece is important as well, right? People do trust that good quality comes out of Canada.
I mean, just to pick up on that quality of life piece, I mean, that is one of the huge recruiting advantages that Canada has in the AI space. That was, we can't compete on dollars, compensation, access to computing infrastructure, any of those things. But part of what brings, incredible researchers to Canada and gets them to turn down a lot more money elsewhere is that the quality of life and the environment in Canada is just better. So, I mean, it's also important as we're talking about talent to realize that, yeah, as you said, like humans are humans and care about all of those things. And that's another way that we can leverage our advantage.
Lydia, I wanted to come back to you on this talent piece, because you've talked a couple of times now about the importance of having the ability to actually do this. So, I mean, do we have the workforce and the training systems in place right now to fuel the industry?
So I think it's evolving, right? We could do probably better at the maturity level, which again, this is why I keep, coming back to the fact that the discussion needs to start, and it probably already needed to start, and it looks like it has, which is great. I think that we can be very competitive in this space. Do we need to work on it? Absolutely. Do we need, more training, more reskilling, upskilling? All of that, yes, right? We do need to focus on that, right, but we also have to put Canada in a position as being competitive, and having companies, right, want to look at us and say, yeah, Canada's competitive, let's take a look there.
Eric, you were making a point about the public-private version or like nature of this when we talked earlier.
Yeah, so there's a couple of points I was going to make about the workforce. One is in the Navy, from what I understand, it seems to be standard practice, not just in Canada, but in many countries. The people that actually go to sea get trained in some area for 2 years, and then they move to something else for 2 years. And so none of those people are going to end up being good subsea vehicle operators. They don't have, it's not going to work. So, like the Americans use a lot of contractors in a lot of roles, and Canada has started to use contractors in some roles, so it could be that's a practice that's going to have to start. Another separate subject is that if you want to get into the defense space, there are a lot of hurdles that you have to overcome in your security systems, in the types of people, in the nationalities of people in your company who are allowed to work on projects. And in some cases, like with our company, we are often partnering with foreign companies who will actually have the clearances to understand what the real use case is for things. So that's like for a Canadian to sell into the US and understand what what this thing's actually going to do is difficult. So you have to, collaboration is really important. Collaboration within Canada, collaboration outside of Canada, and what I mentioned before about the willingness of the defense departments to use contractors or keep their people in one position long enough to get really, really good at something.
Just on that point about selling to the U.S., are you talking about primes there or specialized consultancies? Like, who should these people be talking to?
Yeah, well, that's it. Like, we haven't talked about the value chain for any of this stuff. Like in the offshore commercial world, there's people that make components, people that integrate them into autonomous vehicle systems, and then like us, and then we would sell to like survey companies or to construction primes offshore, and then their clients might be an oil and gas company. And then the defense business, we would sell to or partner with either a prime or a second tier prime who sells to primes, and then the primes sell to the navies. But it's often the people in the defense departments who say, I really want this. We need to make this happen so that your company can do this, and they will help. Right. And yeah, that happens in the commercial world as well.
Phil, what about on the talent piece? I mean, you're building software and hardware. There's a lot of demand for people who can do either right now.
Sorry, I didn't.
There's a lot of demand for certainly for AI people and for like robotics
and
people.
that comes down to because the hardware is changing very, very fast, both because the Americans, Chinese, Koreans, Japanese, everyone, you get into this point where you're like, okay, is it build versus buy? And you have to be very pragmatic about that. So we started very early in 2018, focusing on, dexterity, went through various hand technologies. Well, we were at Coral, and 28 hand companies have been spun up, right, in like the last year and a half. So looking very closely, going, where are you, ahead of us, behind us? Does this have promise? You have to be very pragmatic about that. Ultimately, we think the hardware is going to be commoditized. So the focus is on the software, the data, the customer relationship, and that's where we're focused.
I want to talk about the other people side of this for a second. So all of our pop culture doomsday scenarios, except I think the most recent Mission Impossible movie, not to spoil it for anyone, that involve AI. The AI doomsday scenarios are all about killer robots, right? Including the most famous one we've ever had. This is a silly way to ask the question about trust. Brent, how do companies and policymakers get people on side with the idea of robotics in the world, but also particularly in defense?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a really important question, and this is something that the AI community did not do particularly well. I think that's one of the challenges that we've had, and one of the lessons we've learned is that, when you look at any public opinion polling from Canadians, we do not like AI, we do not trust AI, we are not enthusiastic about it. And that is a big driver of why our adoption of AI as a country is also lower. So I think there's two components to how do you build trust. I mean, one is the engagement. One is, telling the stories about how this is not a doomsday technology and it's something that actually helps people. It's something, and not just in the, it's leading to better social media algorithms kind of whatever. It's, this is leading to better prosthetics. This is leading to medical advances. This is leading to the things that actually help people in their day-to-day life that they don't realize were underpinned by AI. So, in robotics, it's telling that story as well. It's, it's the surgical stuff. It's the things that demonstrably improve Canadians' quality of life. The other side of it is trustworthiness. So, you're telling your story, but also how do you make sure that that story is authentic? So, there's a whole line of research in AI about values. The theme is alignment for the symposium. Values alignment. How do you make sure that AI aligns with what humans actually want? And I think robotics actually has some advantages over AI in that way. I mean, you have certification, you have standards, you have safety protocols in a way that can make that trustworthiness a much easier sell is the wrong word, but a way to make that case really authentically that this is safe, this is tested, this is something that you can trust, this is really robust to changes in the environment, and showing that to Canadians.
Can I just push you just very quickly on that point, which is to say, it's one thing to say, you know, these robots are helping with surgeries and like these needs that we have. It's another thing to say, you know, they are getting closer and closer to a battlefield.
True, yeah. And I mean, laws are something that creeps people out. So I think part of it is also expanding the conversation so it's not just about laws. It's about it's remote sensing. It's everything that goes into the defense and security apparatus that isn't, you know, an autonomous lethal weapons platform. So, you know, showing, and I think that's where most of our dual use stuff is going, is those other things that help to secure the country, not just putting a gun on a robot. So yeah, really showing that, you know, it's how do those underwater platforms secure Canadian waters.
Phil and then Eric.
Yeah, the other thing I think is important is to put it into a context that people can understand. One is to say, you know, we're focused on jobs that are, you know, we call dull, dirty, dangerous, and you give examples of that. You know, one of the use cases we're focusing on involves inserting a plug into a box for an industrial application that people have to do 27,000 times a day. So you put in that and say, do you want to do that job for 8 hours a day for the rest of your life? And the answer is no. Okay, are you opposed to it being automated? Oh, I guess not. So that's part of it. The other is to bring it into a household context and say, you know, 20 years ago, if you were talking to a robot, would that have seemed weird? It's like, yeah, probably a bit strange. Well, you talk to Siri, you talk to Alexa, you got a Roomba vacuum running around. It's coming, but it's coming in a very measured way. And I think when you think about physical AI and how that will evolve, it'll be, I think, industrial first, service second, consumer household last. So that might take some of the dystopian sting out of it, possibly.
I think for hardware software systems to be trusted, there are standard engineering methodologies for building something, like designing it, defining what the risks are, having a structured design and build test process that mitigates the risks and tests it at the end. So then the challenge is integrating new technologies into that process that you don't necessarily understand. I can talk about this all day long. In our applications, large language model AI is practically useless because our vehicles are underwater, there's no internet, there's no GPS, they have to be smart. And so how do we do that? Well, there are tons of other AI technologies other than large language models. So if you're thinking about studying AI, don't just say, well, AI equals large language models, because there's a whole huge world of artificial intelligence out there.
I'm just going to take it a little bit down a different stream. So, you know, we've obviously have some experience in this as well, right? And, you know, people have had the fear, right? And are seeing it now, realize that it's not a fear. It's actually getting more collaboration and alignment, right? Even on the factory shop floor. So you now have the blue collar workers working with the engineers a lot more closely than they have in the past, working with the data analysts and really having that collaboration, right, towards safety, productivity, efficiency, and the rest of it. So if anything, it is enhancing. To your point, right, Phil, there's, you know, we have the Roomba. We didn't imagine this, you know, years ago, and it gets better, right? I was actually wondering if you were listening on a conversation, because you said a lot of the words that came up, right, when I was talking to a number of colleagues the other day. But, you know, at the end of the day, we couldn't imagine where we are when we think about, you know, the work we had to do 20 years ago compared to the work we do today. Right? I think we have more engaged and a happier, and you know, from that safety standpoint, even the psychological safety, knowing that I'm going to come in and there are other tools, right, that can help me be productive in my day.
Okay, so with our last few minutes, I saved the most awkward for last. It's about money. So it seems like the only thing the government has a lot of money for at the moment, the federal government at least, is defense. I will quickly. I was at the federal cabinet retreat a couple of weeks ago, and it was remarkable to me the degree to which journalists could ask a minister any question about the economy, and we'd go back to the defense industrial strategy within about 30 seconds. They're really talking about this these days. So let me ask the kind of root question, which is every company now interested in dual use just because like that's where the money is?
I have a warning for any companies that want to get into that, and that is, well, first of all, I have to say that I do hope Mark Carney and his new plans for procurement are going to be successful, because, and a disclaimer, we are very pleased that from the support that we've got from Defense R&D Canada over the past few years, but you cannot, it's very difficult to depend on any kind of government contracts as long as the standard procurement systems are in place. So I think that could be changing, and I think they will have to change in order to spend this amount of money.
Just quickly, give me like in one sentence form your top 3 problems with the procurement system.
I'll give you an example. So our client, DRDC, had their budget, they had the statement of work, they knew what they wanted to do, but it took 11 and a half months for us to get a contract for it. And that's while we had already been working with them for some time. And so, like, yeah, just keep the team employed, and we'll get the contract in place.
Phil, let me be even ruder, which is to say, building robotics takes a lot of money. Like, how easy or difficult have you found it to get the money to build these technologies?
It depends on the day of the week, I guess. Generally, it's been pretty easy. I think the support has been very good from the Canadian VC community, from various levels of government. We've been a little bit careful, and I think this enters into this defense spending perspective. You know, from my patriot Canadian perspective, I'd love to see defense spending focused on force capability and force readiness first and foremost. And then any dual use definition be pretty clear. You don't want it to be too blurry because you got to hit a spending target, and then all of a sudden the money gets sprayed everywhere. It doesn't have the desired result. But I say in general, it's been pretty good. You're naturally drawn to the U.S., right, because of the VC ecosystem there. But I think we have absolutely no complaints about the level of support we received.
Can I just ask whether you're seeing, because of all, not just in Canada, but like of all of the interest in strategic industries, and defense is one of them, but just building up strategic capability, whether you're seeing private sector investors get more interested in those industries as well?
Yeah, I think so, but it's been a little gradual. I think it's accelerating now. I mean, the place where it's most transparent and most overt is China, obviously. They're very clear. Here's the 5-year plan, and here's the priorities, and it happens really fast. You know, you have to be mindful of that and factor that into your strategy and how it's going to be effective. But I think it's becoming more, the challenge, I think, because a lot of the physical AI isn't really a product yet. People are focused on the supply chains and what's available to invest in and private markets and things like that. I think as it evolves, you'll have a clearer menu of things to invest in. And I think the capital, or the investor focus will become, I think, more refined.
Brent, I want to ask you about turning this into something sustainable, because we're now on, depending on how you count it, phase 3 of the pan-Canadian AI strategy, and obviously the goal there was to seed something that could eventually take off and take wing by itself. How do you get from A to B?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it is about having, a coherent and connected ecosystem. One of the things that I'm really struck by is that, like this room and this event, this does not exist for Canada's AI community. Like there is not sort of a convening and pretty comprehensive group that exists. So I think this is a great point to be starting from. And yeah, I mean, I think it's like, this is a bit motherhood and apple pie, but it is about the different aspects of that community coming together, with government, bringing the public along for the ride, and, showcasing benefits. And then also, yeah, building the economic fundamentals that it sounds like are incredibly strong with, with capital coming in. Yeah, and telling that story. Canadians don't know about this. Canadians barely know about how great we are in the AI sector. We do need to get better at telling our own Canadian story to ourselves.
Lydia, I'll give you the last word here. You've got an audience here of folks engaged in this community. What are a couple of things you think they need to go out and do to take advantage of this opportunity?
So yeah, I think, everything from a business standpoint always comes down to the business cases, right? So why invest if I take a Canada slant on it? And we do this for every country, right? So why invest? Why put it here? What are the platforms available? So we have, a huge platform of, multiple divisions in Canada and whatnot. So there's a lot of opportunities, right, that we see that can come from that. And as a company, we want to grow in this space, right? So I think, understanding, I'm going to go back to the talent piece of it, right? So understanding where our talent's going to come from. When I talk about, the collaboration between blue collar, the engineers, the data scientists, like that is so key. That means there's so much academia, not only in the universities and the college that we can draw on. There are people who are now in the workforce who are, mid-career, who are experiencing, right, this change. They don't understand necessarily. So what do we do to upscale, make them aware, right, of what we're doing? And I think, that strong collaboration between the startups, between the companies. I think the conversation needs to happen. I think where we can work effectively together, we need to do that, right, in order to build this, for a stronger community. And again, if I put on my Canada hat, right, we've got so much potential here, and it's truly not tapped into as far as it could be.
Well, to pick up that defense metaphor, you've got your marching orders. Thank you all so much for doing this with me. Please give our panelists a round of applause, and we'll move on.